Good morning, King's Church. I'm here with two of my favourite people from King's Church, John and Sophie Ford. Great to have you with us this morning. And I'm going to ask you some questions, basically, and hear a little bit about your lives the last few years. But first of all, for people in the church who don't know, you've got four, I would describe as quite lively children. How has lockdown been in the Ford family?
Lively. Yeah, I think like everyone, it's been a mixture of probably quite a few highs and quite a few lows. We've had to homeschool 4 children, so that's been interesting.
Have you ever homeschooled before?
We've thought about it. I think we did one child for 2 days, and that was it. Decided
so it wasn't a high success
wasn't for
rate.
us. But yeah, actually lockdown, it's been all right. I think it's been stressful at times, but we've kind of juggled and arranged our priorities of things. You learn to hold on to things lightly, don't you, I think? And yeah, just try to get a balance between trying to have fun together and keeping a bit of routine. I've really enjoyed early morning walks, having a bit of time to myself and just enjoying the quietness of the roads, and so that's been really nice.
And Sophie's smoothie bar on Friday mornings is a highlight.
A smoothie bar?
Yes.
You've opened this to the general public or to
No, merely the Ford family.
Okay.
Yeah. Just
In-house.
something to look forward to on a Friday.
That's awesome. Now I want to ask you a little bit about your time in Istanbul. We've wheeled out the UK and Turkish flag.
Yes.
For education purposes as well as the ambassadorial role you're doing for Turkey. And I would basically want to ask, first of all, what led you to going out there to Istanbul? Because I don't think it was a place you'd been to much before in your lives, before you lifted up your whole lives and moved there.
Yeah, so I suppose as a 19-year-old, I first felt God speak to me, particularly about the nations. In particular, I was in a meeting and someone mentioned there were 7,000 people groups, which meant there were 7,000 groups of people who were ethnically diverse with distinct language who weren't able to access the gospel through local believers. In other words, there weren't local indigenous churches, and it was just tragic these people couldn't hear about Jesus. And I remember something really landing in my heart then, and almost this whisper from God saying, you know what, are you going to be part of that solution?
Now, you mentioned it was your first church plant with your friend Annie McCulloch. Are there many churches in Istanbul?
There are about 45, 50 churches, but lots of those churches would have 10, 20 people in them. So they wouldn't be big. So the biggest churches would be 150 people, but most churches would be 15, 20 people.
Yeah. So a real gospel need. I always remember you doing an illustration of Wembley Stadium to kind of demonstrate the number of believers that are in Turkey.
Yeah, shall I explain that one
Yeah,
again?
absolutely.
Great. So basically the scenario goes, if you fitted a random sample of the population from the UK in Wembley Stadium, so 90,000 capacity, you'd expect about 2,700 believers, so evangelical believers, to be among the crowd. If you did the same with people from Turkey, a random sample of the population, you'd expect 8 people. So there are just very few people who know the gospel, who have heard it. And so there's a real need to see churches that are planted there, that proclaim the gospel. And the wonderful thing is God is doing things there, and people are having dreams about Jesus even when there aren't churches. So God's still reaching people and calling people to himself.
Yeah, amazing. So we fast forward to, 18 was the first time that God spoke to you about going into the nations. We fast forward to you moving your lives over there. Could you give us maybe a flavour? What are some of the highlights of your time there? And remind me, is it 5 or 6 years?
6 years.
6 years.
Wow, highlights. I just think mainly probably just learning about another culture. I think living. Yeah. I think really being accepted by other people as well. I mean, I think Turks are incredibly friendly. They love kids. We were a bit of it felt like we were a bit of a celebrity in our neighbourhoods because our kids were very blonde at the time, and we had 4. Lots of Turkish families have 1 or 2. So, we were a bit of a novelty. But people were really friendly and really welcomed us. And I think it was just good fun to kind of learn how another culture does life, really, and to be included in it.
Yeah, I also think we just believe, don't we, in God calling us on adventures. And that can be in the UK, that can be other places. But it felt like a real adventure going to Turkey. I think there was this real excitement about being in a place where we felt God was clearly leading us, and then seeing God use us. And there was this thrill of seeing people become Christians, some people, and seeing this church community form. I mean, that was just a thrill.
Yeah. It's amazing, really, from what you're saying, people actually became Christians. So maybe just tell us a story or two of how people actually came to faith. You know, was it through doing an Alpha course, was it through conversations? Was it what means did God use to bring about people coming to faith in him?
I think lots of people would come through having had dreams about Jesus, and that was very common, not just in our church but other churches. And they'd have these dreams. Maybe there was kind of an unsettled feeling in their own faith. Initially, there was usually something that had sparked that, and they have a dream about Jesus, and then it almost is look up on the internet. Well, where can I find out about lots of people who came to the church had kind of looked online and seen where's the nearest one, or where can I find out about this? So there's been a kind of initial searching for answers. Do you want to just talk about Nergis?
Yeah, so Nergis was a Uzbekistan lady who came to us, and she came to us after having a dream, and it was a dream where she saw this she saw this snake on a pole being lifted up. And then she woke up from this dream, and she came to church. She said, "Look, I had this really weird dream. I saw this snake lifted up on this pole, and what on earth could it mean?" And then I was able to go, "Oh, well, look, in the Old Testament, there's this story about Moses lifting up this snake on a pole, this copper snake, and people being healed. And actually then the Gospels talk about Jesus being the one who's lifted up and will draw all people to himself." And it was just a remarkable thing. And then she shared another story where she said, "In this dream I saw this person," and she basically described the picture of Jesus in Revelation 1 and said, "What does that mean?" And you were able to literally turn to Revelation chapter 1 and go, look at this story here. And it was just remarkable. So she became a Christian the next week because God was on her case.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was easy. It was you had to be quite incompetent, not bring the person through to faith, because God was so clearly working.
Brilliant. Such a great story. Well, it's been a year since you moved back to the UK from your time over in Turkey. I want to ask, first of all, how your old church is doing. Life Church Üsküdar, isn't it?
Yeah. The answer is it's really struggled the last year. I think the challenge of coming back to the UK was the fact we knew that hadn't really got the leadership yet in place for when we felt comfortable to going back to the UK. At the same time, we knew that it was right for us to go back to the UK, and so we went back. But that was really hard, and that felt like a real faith thing, and it almost felt like giving up on something that we'd poured our lives into and laying it down and going, "God, you've got to look after it." Amazingly, the other church that my friend Andy McCulloch planted, their leadership team agreed to look after it for a year, and they felt very clearly God speak to them about look after it for a year. So that's what they were doing, but it was kind of in a bit of a holding position. So they were serving it, they were doing great, but it wasn't really moving forward. I was in a meeting in Turkey in March where they were talking as a team and saying, you know what, probably unless some radical change happens, we're probably going to have to shut it down at the end of the year, or in July. Anyway, and then amazingly, we had this guy, Christian, this couple, Christian and Sarah, come and stay with us. They were due to stay with us for 2 days during lockdown, but actually then lockdown happened during the coronavirus system, and they ended up staying with us over a month, which meant I had loads of time talking to them about Turkey, and we just spent lots of time getting to know them well. They were planning to go back to Turkey to plant a church. And over that time, we just talked to them a little bit about Üsküdar, and then I had another conversation with them more formally a while later. And we just said, look, pray, see if God's leading you about being involved with Üsküdar for at least for a year or so prior to planting something. And then about 4 weeks ago, he phoned me up and said, you know what, God's spoken. God's spoken to both myself and my wife, Sarah. We're going to go back to Turkey, and then we're going to at least commit to a year at the Üsküdar church to take on the leadership of that. So I'm thrilled, and the timing was amazing. He phoned me up 364 days after we'd done our last Sunday leading the church. So you go slap bang in that prophetic thing where the guy said, look, take it for a year. Christy's come. So so in September, they're currently stuck in Peru, but in September, he's going to be back leading that church and the team.
Phenomenal. That's so encouraging to see how God's been sovereign, even over some of the struggles over the last year. And looking at you guys and how life's been the last year, bit of a maybe a crash landing. It was obviously big cultural change to move to Turkey. I don't know if it was just as bigger, smaller coming back here. How have you found the last year?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it wasn't such a kind of cultural shock coming back as big as I thought it was going to be. I think we've been blessed enough to come back to the house that we were in before. We're back in the same area. We're back at King's Church, and we've been welcomed and supported, and we feel very much part of that. So I think that's really helped. Yeah, I mean, I think coming back is a process, and you have times that are really difficult and times that are really sweet. And I think that, we're not through that. It very much is up and down. I think lockdown has probably raised a few more issues for the children. I think where they were beginning to settle. I think just having that time to really think about, what Turkey's like, and missing their friends. So I think that's been harder for them. But I think with lots of things, you can, if you know that God's brought you to a place, even in those difficult times, you can, you know why you're there. So I think, we're very much on a journey, and we're getting, I feel we're settling. I wouldn't say we've settled, but I think very much we're settling, and the kids are beginning to have friends and getting to know people, which is, really good for them.
And I think it was really helpful. I felt like there was at least one really profound prophetic word that helped us make the move back to the UK, in terms of one that felt like return to your home base. So that really helped us. I think God's been really gracious with us landing at King's Church. I think I'm just thrilled to be working at the church. That's a real privilege. And also still having a day a week set aside to supporting churches in the Middle East. And so that's thrilling. So it still feels like, yes, we've left Turkey, but we're still involved there to some extent, and hopefully helping raise up others to go, because obviously there's such a need for people to go to nations in the world where people don't know about Jesus.
And that's a great answer. I was going to say, what would you say to anybody who might have a particular nation on their heart, or have a desire one day to either go and join a church plant or start one from scratch?
Chat to me. Oh, Sophie. But also really just keep on seeking God. I think the challenge is, in local churches in the UK, the reality is we don't talk about the nations every week. And so there needs to be something that keeps that fire alive, because I think the reality is lots of people probably have a passion for the nations, and God even speaks to them about it. But the reality is it maybe sometimes never actually develops or grows. And there's a need to keep that fire burning and developing. And I think there's a proactivity required in that. But certainly start speaking to people, start seeking God.
Pray. And also go and have look-sees, even if it's maybe not the place that you end up. I think going to countries and just seeing other people in their context who've done that can answer a lot of the questions, or kind of, or put a lot of questions before you. It's a good way of kind of just investigating and questioning.
Sounds good.
John and Sophie, thanks very much for the conversation. Thanks very much for the chai. It's been a delight speaking to you.
Afia Tolson.
Afia Tolson.
What was that? Afia Tolson.
Afia Tolson.
Cheers?
Cheers.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, similar.
I don't think that made it into my Turkish parlance when I was over there visiting.